So I'm happy to introduce the presenter of our webinar today, Sister Amy Hereford, a sister of St. Joseph. She has degrees in science, communication, and theology, as well as in civil and canon law. Apart from formation, administration, and leadership roles, she ministers as a consultant and facilitator in assisting religious organizations and institutes to face the challenges of an uncertain and changing future. Sister Amy has several books that address important issues in religious life today, and among them is Navigating Change, published in 2015. It's an interdisciplinary examination of the phenomenon of religious communities that are approaching the end of their life cycle. So based on her vast experience in helping those who are making important choices about the future of their institutes, she is presenting today's webinar on practical guidelines for aging religious institutes. Sister Amy, you are most welcome, and thank you for accepting to present this webinar. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me just bring up my presentation, which is on the Navigating Change is basically my dissertation in canon law, and this presentation will be based on that. So I want to start out with a couple of canons to give you an idea of what's available for us to work with when we think about canonical guidance for the end of an institute's life cycle. There's not a lot. As you can imagine, your own constitutions as well as canon law mainly address a religious institute or a society that is up and running. And so there's not a lot on either setting up or coming to the end of an institute, but we do have these canons. Canon 580 is on aggregation, one that we don't use a lot, but it's aggregation of one institute of consecrated life to another is reserved to the competent authority of the aggregating institute, always safeguarding the canonical autonomy of the other institute. So this is where a smaller institute would aggregate to a larger institute, or has commonly been used in 1983 when the code was written. This would have been like a Franciscan community aggregating to another Franciscan community. But I think there's a lot of potential in this canon. 581, this is in the section on that's common norms to religious institute, and then it's incorporated for societies of apostolic lives as well. 581, it's for the competent authority of the institute to divide into parts by whatever name these may be called and to establish new parts. This would be dividing into provinces, and establishing new provinces, uniting provinces, or to modify their existence in accord with the Constitution. So any of that internal organization is left to the internal authority, whether it's the usually congregational leadership and council, and or the congregational chapter. 582 is restructuring. So this is unions and fusions. They're reserved to the Apostolic See alone. This would be when one institute, or at least two institutes, come together. One institute either completely joins another institute, or two or more institutes come together and form a new institute. That's reserved to the Apostolic See, because I think a lot of our diocesan bishops would not have the ability to wade through the various issues involved. And then also federations and confederations, which federations would be basically groups of communities like Franciscans, Sisters of St. Joseph, who come together. Basically, they share a charism and they share resources and support one another. Confederation would be a federation of federations. So those are also reserved to the Apostolic See. 584, only the Apostolic See can suppress an institute and dispose of its goods. So that's only the Apostolic See, whether it's a diocesan or pontifical community. Disposing of its temporal goods assumes that there's temporal goods that aren't disposed of before the institute is suppressed. Then suppression of the parts, 585, just like the institute could divide into provinces, it can also suppress those provinces. So the competent authority of the institute can suppress parts of the same institute. Autonomy. I think this is an important canon to keep in mind. A true autonomy of life, especially of governance, is recognized for each institute. This autonomy means that each institute has its own discipline in the church and can preserve whole and entire the patrimony described in Canon 578. Canon 578 is the opening canon, which talks about the spiritual patrimony, the nature, spirit, and character of each institute. So the institute is a gift of God to the church, to the whole people of God, as well as to the people who are living in the institute. And the experts at living that gift, at living that charism, would be the people in the institute. So there's an autonomy of life that is proper to the religious institute. And this is, the canon simply says it's recognized. It's not like we're giving that. The code doesn't give that. It is of the nature of religious life that it has its own autonomy. He has the responsibility to have deference for that autonomy of life. So this is diocesan and pontifical right, 593 and 594. A pontifical community is in their internal governance and discipline. Pontifical institutes are subject directly and exclusively to the authority of the Apostolic See, without prejudice to that internal autonomy we just talked about. And then likewise, communities of diocesan right, Institute of Diocesan Right, remains under the special care of the diocesan bishop, again, without prejudice to the autonomy proper to each institute. These next two canons are farther into the section on religious life. I do sometimes get a question, well, can we elect somebody from outside the institute? And your constitution's probably prevented, but this is also in the code. In order for members to be appointed or elected validly to the function of superior, a suitable time is required after perpetual or definitive profession to be determined by proper law, or if it concerns superiors, by the constitutions. So each superior depending. And then the other thing that I want to highlight is that the right of each member of the community to be able to live their vocation. They've given their entire lives to this community, and they have the right, the code gives them a right, to receive then everything that's necessary to live out their vocation. So the Institute must supply the members with everything that, in accord with the constitutions, is necessary to fulfill the purpose of their vocation. So these, I will refer back to some of these canons, but as you can see, there's not a lot of real guidance as to what to do as communities age and get smaller and older. Regarding the scope of the issue, I've worked primarily in the US. I've also worked with some communities in other countries, oftentimes if they have a US connection. So just within the US context, there are hundreds of institutes that are facing this challenge. So it's a lot of communities. I would say probably 300 or 400 communities in the US are beginning to deal with or are already deep into dealing with these issues. The median age of our communities is in the 80s. So we've got a lot of elderly members. We have fewer people with the energy, the capacity, and the temperament for leadership. And even if they technically qualify, not everybody in the community has the energy. They might have had the energy 10, 20 years ago. They might have done great things, but they may no longer have that energy. They may not have the capacity. And some of our folks, you know, they'll say, well, they would make a great leader. They've got the energy and they got the capacity, but do they have the temperament? I know this especially when we talk about, well, we've got, 10 people under the age of 60 or under the age of 70, they could be in leadership, but does each of them have that ability to lead? So that's been a real critical issue, is ensuring that we have people who are able to lead the communities. And then I think of also of our local churches. Religious have been in leadership for, a long time, both in ministry and in spirituality in all of our local churches. So this is a real loss for the local churches as well. Looking back historically, a couple of places we can get some guidelines. First of all, Perfecta Caritatis, already in 65, was recommending merger or affiliation for declining institutes. So given where we are today, that could mean that institutes would merge, and then there'd be another one that needed to merge in and another one that needed to merge in. So it would basically, I don't think it really recognized the extent of the problem, or the extent of the problem that was coming, and the need to allow some institutes to flourish if they've got that capacity. The motu proprio Ecclesiae Sanctae gave these as the indicia of decline. First of all, the small number of religious in proportion to the age of the institute or monastery. So it's both the number of people and the age of the people. The lack of candidates over a period of several years, and the advanced age of the majority of the members. So those, we can say, probably apply to many of our institutes. Some of the solutions that have been tried and have actually worked for some communities, two of them I'll point out. One is what we call the covenant relationship. This is similar to Canon 580, where we talked about affiliation. A larger, more stable community would enter into a relationship and then an agreement to take on the responsibility for a smaller, more fragile community. We had, I would say, in the 90s and the early aughts here in the US, we had a number of these that I think really effectively helped a number of different communities and really were a blessing to both the larger and the smaller communities. At this point, there are so many communities needing help that I don't think this is a viable way forward, although, it's certainly among the options. The commissary, or some of the Roman documents will call it the commissioner or canonical trustee. I like to use the term canonical trustee because neither the commissary and commissioner doesn't really explain it. It's basically somebody who's entrusted with the canonical governance of an institute, an individual religious, and usually it's a religious, appointed by competent authority, and it would be competent authority outside the institute, either the local bishop, if it's a diocesan institute, or Rome, if it's a pontifical institute. That person is appointed to take on the responsibility for a community that's unable to supply its own leadership. And that's either leadership through chapters and elections, or through actually having a leader in council. This is where we are today, and I think a lot of us think that this is okay for now, but I don't think it has the potential for being a solution long term, particularly because there are so many communities that need help and so few who are able to serve in this capacity. So those are some of the solutions that we've seen over the years and some of the insights that we got from Vatican II and going forward. Regarding the situations that we find, every community has its own distinct reality. It is its own distinct gift from the Holy Spirit. It's also the way it lives its story. So even like I'm a sister of St. Joseph, another CSJ community might have a very, very different reality, even though we share a charism. So difference in size, difference in location and geographic spread. So some groups I work with, everybody's living in the same house. Others, they're on several continents. The internal resources, are there people with capacity for leadership, even if you can't do it, even if you don't have the capacity to hold a chapter or to have a whole council, are there people who can do some leadership or leadership in some way within the community? Are there finances available within the community? Local and regional situations also vary. Sometimes a local church, a community may have been very much in relationship with the local church, and there's capacity in the local church to support the community. Are there other religious communities in the region? Makes a big difference. Is there what I call community support? I'm talking about just the general people of God. Are there people out there who know the community and are willing to come forward and have the capacity to help them out? And then what are the historical ministries? And a lot of groups with schools have former students who are able to come back. If you did another kind of ministry, you may or may not have people who are, familiar with the community and ready to gather around and help out. Also, family members of the sisters or brothers can be helpful. Again, governance structure, another difference. Is it just one unit, or are there multiple provinces? Is it diocesan or pontifical? I'm going to specifically not talk about contemplative monasteries. Many of the issues are the same, but Vultum Dei and Cor Orans would be where you turn for guidance on contemplative monasteries. They have, again, many of the same issues, but also some of their own distinct issues because of that contemplative vocation. And finally, is there a federation? Are there other communities with the same charism, or is it a community that was founded on its own without other communities in that same charism family? So each of these is going to affect how a community moves into this stage of its life. I'll be speaking primarily about the situation in the US, which is where I'm from. First of all, we had, 2 centuries of steady growth, both in our general population as well as in religious life, up until the middle 1900s. And then there was this decline. That's basically our entire history with religious life in this country. Different countries are going to have a different experience with that. But it does affect kind of the assumptions that we bring into this question. Another issue in the US is the funding for retired aging religious, our members, because there are a number of reasons historically why religious communities are tasked with funding the retirement of their sisters with very little support from the government. And they didn't build up the resources. It was just each generation supported the generations that came before it. We're at a point where that's no longer viable, and so there's been concerted effort here in the US. The National Religious Retirement Office, NRRO, was formed by the Bishops' Conference and the 2 leadership conferences of men and women to basically collect funds for this and also help communities address their financing. So I know some regions financing is not an issue. It always is in the U.S. Either they're well funded or not, and that colors the planning that they can do. I also always aware when I'm working with communities that this is their life. This is the life they've given their best energies to. And so as we approach the end of the life of the community, we need a theology to address this time. And Metz and Rahner are the two that I usually turn to. Metz with his Ars Moriendi, The Art of Dying, says that, unlike the wider church, religious institutes were never intended to live forever. They're gifts of the Spirit blows where it will, and these communities have a lifespan. And so coming to the end of that lifespan is simply the same as coming to the end of any human lifespan. Death is not a failure or defeat, it's part of the Paschal mystery. Metz says, only if we cling desperately to what is passing away will the end be defeat. And then Rahner, our most important role as Christians is to say yes to God, whatever God is calling us to. And the final, most complete yes we're called to say is a yes to death. And that's both as individuals, but also as communities. So at this moment, at this really sacred moment in a community's life story, our call is that come follow me. We are called to lay down our lives and to surrender, even in death, to the call of God. That God who has never been absent from the life story of our communities, for our individual life story and the life of the community. So then turning to the actual journey, what are we looking for? We're looking for an orderly transition of ministries. Are the ministries going to continue? And how is that going to happen? Ensuring the suitable care of each of the members. And we always have front of mind the care of the elderly members, but also many of our communities have a handful of younger folks, and making sure that they also have the ability to do the ministry that they entered for, be in relationship to the community, and that they have what they need as well. Also passing on the spiritual patrimony of the Institute and settling what I call the legacy, like what are we called to leave behind? What are we called to pass over as our legacy? And then the disposition of any remaining temporal goods. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We know that we got the Holy See at our back to dispose of anything that we don't take care of. But it's good to do some planning as well. So first, sponsorship. Traditional sponsorship is a large topic, but basically communities have been in relationship to their separately incorporated sponsored ministries through various legal methods that allow them to have a modicum of control, but also some influence, importantly influence, to ensure that these two things at the beginning, missio, ensuring the mission of Jesus continues and the Catholic identity is present. And then communio is making sure there's a connection with the church. So that's what we've done. As we move forward and we're facing the inability to take care of our own communities, what are our options? Are there others who could take on that sponsorship? The ministerial public juridic person is increasingly a good option. There are a number of countries who've done a good bit with that. The US has done a lot. Australia has done a good bit. One of the challenges with this is that they're currently under the dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life and Societies of Apostolic Life in Rome, and they only have the jurisdiction over religious institutes and their ministries by extension. We're talking about establishing these ministerial public juridic persons with the idea that they will outlive the religious institutes that founded them. but then the Dicastery for Institutes Consecrated Life will no longer have jurisdiction. A number of us were kind of hoping that with the reorganization of the Curia, they would have addressed this, either put it in a different dicastery or expand the competence of the Dicastery for Religious. Neither of those happened, so that remains a jurisdictional problem that for now these ministerial public jury persons are good, but there are some challenges there. For schools don't necessarily need a juridic connection. They can be simply, quote, acknowledged as Catholic. That's Canon 803. And that would be up to the diocesan bishop to acknowledge them as Catholic in a written document. And then probably there would be some kind of a follow-up as to what the expectations for this new Catholic school with no formal sponsorship. And then there is also no formal sponsorship, a group that might have this missio, carry out the mission of Jesus, but without the corresponding communio, that communion, formal sponsorship relationship. In considering the whole issue of sponsorship, viability of the ministries is first thing to consider. Does this ministry have potential life beyond the support, whether it's leadership support, financial support, personnel support of the religious community? If so, let's gather together all the people involved, and first of all, you got to educate them. You have to communicate about what you're planning, what possibilities there are, select a possibility and move forward. This oftentimes involves working also with your civil authorities and amending your civil documents. Even with a change of sponsorship, the Institute remains in relationship with its historical ministries through prayer, support, and volunteers. Okay, so that's sponsorship. There's a lot there. I moved very quickly through it, and there's a lot more that could be said. But that's one of the first things when I'm working with the community is, are the sponsored ministries okay? If yes, we still need to talk about these other things, but that's really, you want to try and get those settled. And many communities have done good work there. For elder care, how is each member going to receive the care they need, where they're going to live, how are they going to receive pastoral care, the care as members of the community, everything they need to live their vocation, who's going to hold powers of attorney as they age. This is an area where I think there are a lot of opportunities for collaboration with other religious institutes and others. One of the challenges is if the community is running its own elder care facility, it needs to let go of that sponsorship and yet keep its members there. The second area, and this is more a US thing and some other countries as well, is funding for elder care. This is a major challenge for some communities. There are different ways of holding the funds in operations, in some kind of a separate fund, or in a trust is one option. A trust is, and I'm speaking Anglo-American civil law here. A trust is a legal arrangement whereby one person holds assets, has the right to invest those, and they must use them for the benefit of a third party. So the trustee is the one who's holding the assets. Historically, we've had the Institute leadership holding those assets. I think increasingly we want to think about non-members serving as trustees, perhaps with some reserve powers to canonical leadership. The beneficiary have been the sick, aged, and infirm sisters and brothers of the congregation. One of the things that we're starting to do with these trusts is use them for what I call estate planning or legacy planning for a community. So the first purpose of the trust would be for the care of the members. If there are additional assets, then they could be used for what I'm going to call legacy purposes, for traditional ministries, some of those ministries that were letting go of sponsorship, for new and emerging needs, for other units, or for other religious who don't have the funding that that the community has. So either an addition to an existing trust or a separate trust can be a funding instrument, both for retired members and for potential legacy if funds exist at the end of the day. Okay, so that's SEAL, that's S-E-A is administration. Canonical leadership has historically been the principal administrators of our community. They serve as the board of directors, they oversee the administration, and often they're extensively involved in the administration. Effective canonical oversight is critical, particularly as communities get older and we're electing older leaders. They really need to be able to provide effective canonical oversight, even as we entrust administration to lay professionals. These lay professionals, if we can build up an administrative organization, support not only the current canonical leadership, but if we need to go for something like a commissary or canonical trustee, that administration that we've set up is already kind of oriented and formed for the needs of this particular community. Here again, this is an area where there's a lot of potential for collaboration among communities. So establishing what I'm calling a right-sized administrative support system. What does this community need now, and what is it likely to need in the next 5, 10, even 20 years? And build your administrative offices to support where you are and where you're headed. Again, this supports elected leadership and other forms of canonical leadership. As you think about this, you also need to be thinking about, if we're looking toward a potential commissary, canonical trustee, the civil documents have to be able to support that transition. Most of the civil documents will tie everything really tightly to the current elected leadership. As we move forward and move to perhaps appointed leadership, even appointed from outside the community, we've got to make sure our civil documents are prepared for that change. And again, as we entrust the very life of the community and its finances and the care of our members to outside people, we do need to make sure that the Institute is protected. So these are the 4 areas. One of the things that a number of areas, national and regional areas, have done is doing what I'm going to call a collaborative community assistance ministry. So a ministry that's really set up to help communities in each of these different areas, or whichever areas the community needs. In the US, we've done that regionally. I know Netherlands, Canada, Australia have done that on a national scale. So this would be regional support for collaboration in elder care and administration, potentially supporting commissaries as that moves forward. And I think there's a real urgency to move toward establishing these and giving these support. I've also heard some federations are starting to talk with one another about providing this kind of support within a federation, which may or may not make sense depending on the size, geographic distribution, et cetera, and the internal resources of the federation. What capacity do they have to bring to this type of an organization? So all of this has been the preparation for a potential change in canonical leadership. And we said before, in order to be in the office of superior, you have to be a member of the community for a given number of years. The canonical minimum for a leader and council is 1 leader and 2 counselors. And they may act collaboratively. I know that's the custom in some communities, but you must have at least 1 leader and 2 counselors. Some constitutions will provide that you need 4 counselors or 6 or 8 counselors. The minimum, you can get a dispensation from either your bishop or Rome, or at least you can ask for going down as low as 2 counselors. But below that, you really need to go to one of these other forms of governance. So when there is no brother or sister available for the ministry, then you turn, or when you can't, some communities can't seat a chapter. They've got people who potentially could lead, but they can't get a canonically constituted chapter. Anyhow, at this point, you turn outside the community for a canonical leader. Usually it could be a member of the community, but instead of being elected in accord with the constitutions, they're going to be appointed by the competent authority. So it's either a member of the community or another religious. Generally speaking, when I've been involved, the individual is appointed with the all the rights and obligations of a superior with it that are set out in canon law. And she also has, most of my cases are she also has the authority to gather a council, could be members of the community, who assist her in carrying out her responsibilities. This individual will be appointed by competent ecclesiastical authority. You're setting aside elections as outlined in the Constitution, and you ask for the appointment of usually a particular brother or sister. Recently, Rome has been asking for 2 options, which is challenging. Also, a mechanism for review. So that this person's appointed, they should be giving at least annual reports, certainly within the community, but then also to the appointing authority. The qualifications for this, the person should be competent, and we expect a lot of our religious leaders, some canonical background, pastoral, administrative, financial, legal oversight. They've got to be able to help the community where it is today. They have to be what I call disinterested. It's a legal term in civil law, where the person has no financial benefit to the transaction. Also, the local bishop has a role to play with a community in his diocese, and so he or his employees shouldn't be involved in this becoming commissaries. We've had some in the global experience. We've had some challenges there. This notion of commissary comes out of Canon 318, which is the section on associations of the Christian faithful. Sorry, I lost it for the minute. So an association of the Christian faithful, in a grave circumstance, the ecclesiastical authority that set it up can designate a commissarium, I like to call it a trustee, who directs the association for a time in its name. Now, historically, this has been for a time through a period of difficulty. We're looking at commissaries who will probably serve for the rest of the life of a community. So it's a much longer period. And we also know that we have a lot of communities needing this service. The idea of merging is rarely the choice that communities are asking for. Merging is a lot of work, and it doesn't resolve the basic issues of the community. So it's rarely a preferred choice. The way many communities will articulate it is they want to live their charism, their specific charism, to the end of their days. And I think that's a fair ask for folks who with a median age in the 80s. Once a community comes to this point and makes the decision, I say it takes about 18 months to implement. It does take time, and so I always encourage communities to give themselves the time they need, not to wait to the very, very end and they look around and they're a chapter and they can't elect anybody. So, well, let's ask Rome for a commissary. You want to do this in a more orderly, discerning way, if possible. Some other alternate paths, we know that within an institute, the institute can reorganize itself, within its own authority. So some communities will suppress the province governance structure and have some other, and it's good to use a different name. So the former, province of, let's say, St. Louis, which is now called the region of St. Louis, or another group that I just worked with, they call them circles. Whatever the name is, it should be something that's distinct, that lets you know this is a governance unit, but it's not bound by the rules of province as established in the constitutions. These can be governed by elected or appointed brothers and sisters. It's often helpful to have a council, even if it's just a couple of people that they can call on for advice or to kind of work through or talk through concerns. And then that group together could conceivably form an expanded congregational council. So that's, again, there are a lot of possibilities within that kind of a model. I've also had some communities who are starting to talk about within a federation, particularly within the same charism, beginning to share, come closer together and begin to share resources, and potentially the idea is they might eventually be sharing some leadership responsibilities for one another. So there are a lot of experimentation out there. I think I said at the beginning, we have a couple of solutions that have worked for a while, but going forward, it can be a real challenge. I have here what I usually recommend to be in a petition for a commissary. I won't go through this, but you're basically asking either the bishop or the dicastery to appoint usually a particular person as the commissary for. It's nice if it's sometimes they'll even appoint the leader of X community, which is nice because then you've got some longevity to it. But anyhow, so there's some background that you want to give the whoever's reviewing this, particularly if it's Rome, you want to give them the information they need to affirm the request. Another area that does require some attention is what I'm going to call legacy. So institutes have the capacity to acquire, possess, administer, and alienate temporal goods. On the extinction of a public juridic persons, the arrangements for its patrimonial goods and rights and for its liabilities are determined by the law and statutes. So you have within your own documents the possibility to provide for that legacy arrangement. If those don't provide for the matter, arrangements devolved on the next higher juridic person, always with due regard to the wishes of the founders or benefactors. So when I'm setting these up, usually I will point to that, founders and benefactors. Why was your community founded? Why were these monies accumulated? And therefore, what should they be dedicated to, and how might you think through that? If you've done that work, it's usually I found that usually acceptable either to a local bishop or to the Apostolic See. We did say if there are funds left over, then that's the Apostolic See. That's not the local bishop who takes care of that. That would be the Apostolic See that sees to that distribution. Again, they usually respect the stated dispositions of an institute, especially when it's going for the historical ministries, in keeping with the charism of the community, the life and mission of the institute. I always, I do know there are some communities who can't support themselves, so I always like to remind people that you might think about giving some to another community that you know, or to some fund that's for elderly religious, even in other countries. And of course, if an institute, if you've made a covenant, if you've made a relationship to another community and they've supported you in your declining years, I think giving back to that institute makes sense. And I did talk earlier about the idea of a trust, legacy clause in a retirement trust, or specifically a legacy trust. Just at the end, kind of the takeaways. It's always good to plan ahead. There is a lot here, and I'm just skimming the surface. So each of these areas it's a lot of work. So it's always good to do what you can do. Be realistic about how long you have, what kind of timeline you have to work with. Collaborate with others. Know you're not alone. You're not alone in this journey, and also our God is always with us. And be generous and trust.
Sister Amy, thank you for sharing with us your profound expertise in this area of ecclesial importance regarding the challenges and choices regarding the aging religious institutes. Your insights have helped us to better understand various perspectives of this important challenge faced by many religious institutes, especially in these delicate times. Thanks so much, and may God continue to bless you in all your endeavors, especially in this particular area. Let me introduce myself. I am Father Pudu, Jesu Pudumai, a Salesian, a professor here at St. Paul, and as the coordinator of the Canon Law Webinar, I wish to thank all the persons at St. Paul University involved in the preparation and conducting of this session and of the series of webinars this year, especially the members of the coordinating team who, along with me, we had Professor Chad Glendenning, the Dean of the Faculty, who introduced this webinar today, then Sister Louise, who coordinated our dialogue session, the administrator of the Center for Canonical Services, and also Ms. Ruth Burrow, the assistant to the Dean and the program coordinator. Finally, a special thanks to all of you, the participants in this seminar, either live or offline. We are truly grateful to you that by your presence, you have supported our initiatives and thus encouraged our faculty to propose various seminars on current canonical challenges. Thanks and goodbye. God bless you all. Thank you.